Thanks for watching Afternoon Live. Our next guest broke the cycle of depression and addiction by drawing on his own experience as a kung fu artist, and now he helps others break free and embrace happiness. Joining us now to share ways to help us tackle trauma, we welcome back transformational specialist and author of Built for Freedom, Bob Gardner. Thanks for joining us, Bob.
Hey, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So I know that you used martial arts in your own life to help you work through some of your own trauma. Can you tell me about how you first started the practice?
I started to practice because I was an angry kid and my parents needed something to do with me. So I had been doing martial arts since I was like 8 years old.
Okay, so you already had kind of the foundation laid of at least the discipline and some of the basics. How did you use that as an adult to kind of help you work you through some issues?
So the biggest confusion that happened at the time was that everybody was talking about depression, they were talking about addiction, they were describing these things as if they were diseases. And I didn't know how to cope with that as a normal human being that had an average job, that didn't have millions of dollars of lab equipment or access to the best facilities to be able to handle this. And so I went back to asking myself the question of what's really happening when I say I feel depressed, or I say I feel anxious, or I say I'm addicted. What do I observe with my own senses is going on? And I started to notice I was dealing with the same things I deal with when I'm dealing with an opponent in a martial arts ring. I'm dealing with tensions, I'm dealing with breathing patterns, I'm dealing with, my posture and how that is. And as I started to adjust those things, I started to notice a very direct correlation between how good I felt and how free I was versus all of those other variables.
That's so interesting. You were able to make that connection at that point. So let's talk about trauma, because we all, I think, have different experiences with that. Is there something that you think is kind of a similar connection in terms of the root cause of some of our traumas?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that want to talk about root causes as events or things that have happened in the past. And the difficulty that I found with that was, with all these thousands of people I've worked with after figuring my own self out, was that you can't go back and change the past. Mm-hmm. So when I'm asking a person, how do you know you have trauma? Like, what is it that you're talking about when you say you're having your trauma come up? And invariably, they would start to talk about, well, I feel bad. And I go, what does that mean you feel bad? Where do you feel bad? Like, is your elbow feel bad? Are your nose hairs freaking out? What's going on here? And they would start to describe a feeling in their gut or an anxiety that shows up, and their eyes would start to dart around. They'd get short of breath. And I was like, those are things we can work with. And essentially, we're just dealing with a habit of reaction. And so what I started doing was having them learn how to retrain those reactions so that if the same trigger came up, their body didn't respond the same way.
Okay, so can you tell me more about kind of using movement and that breath work to deal with those traumas, at least the things that we notice, like you said, that you can kind of notice happening in your own body?
Yeah, it is really, really simple. Let's say you're anxious, for instance. Well, simple thing to do is that your breathing is a certain way. Or if you're depressed, your breathing is another way. Often it's slower or shallower or something. Where anxious, it's a little bit up. So all you do is take hold of it and change it. It doesn't matter which direction you change it at the beginning. Just change it some way, because then you're taking control of the reaction. Reaction happened, we can't change that, but we can decide where it goes next. So I have people take 5 good breaths, like really forcefully, and then I have them hold their breath. If you're depressed, I have them hold it on full. If they're feeling anxious, I have them hold it on empty, because that'll start to regulate the nervous system to a different spot. Hold as long as you can, then breathe normal, and then rinse and repeat as needed.
Okay, and even just kind of taking that break and quieting your mind for a minute can help you kind of recalibrate, at least for the time being?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, and tell me more about, you have this multifaceted, entire nervous system approach. Tell me more about that.
So your nervous system responds to the outside world in these beautiful, complex ways. And a lot of times we're like, well, my breathing, for instance, it has changed. So if I just train my breathing, then I'll be fine. But a lot of times we don't realize that, well, your breathing is one way, and, oh, your posture is one way, and you're tense, and your shoulders are up, and your eyes are focused and darting around. And it's the whole body is engaged in every reaction. So what I figured out how to do was to sort of pin the body down so that it couldn't just be like, well, okay, we'll let her change our breathing, but then when she's done, we'll come back to our old patterns. How many people have experienced this? I change for a little bit and then it all comes back and I'm re-triggered again. So what I decided to figure out how to do for myself and then for others was, how do I pin the whole nervous system down so it can't escape and it can't adapt and it can't figure out how to hold on to its old pattern, and then it has to change. And so I do these in intensive retreats and other methods, but ultimately if you're just dealing with, for instance, a memory of the past event, that's not enough. You also have to deal with your breathing and your movement and stuff. And it's not super complicated. You just have to remember that there's a whole person involved and not just a memory.
You're right. It impacts every facet of your body, your mind, your personality, all of those things. Hey, thank you for spending some time talking with us today.
That was my pleasure. Hopefully it helps people out, even if they're just holding their breath.
Of course. Hey, we've got to start somewhere. The book, again, is Built for Freedom, and we'll have more information on our website at katu.com. We'll be right back with more Afternoon Live right after this.